that everybody wants to see, because there's the verse, isn't there? The moon is from Moedim. So how does that work? That's probably the most common question that I was asked. I only really got the fullness of the answer on Tuesday when I sat down for the second time. Most of this came on Tuesday. A little tiny piece of it came on the day when I was talking about the signs from YHVH. He showed me something about the equinox, but I'll show you that. Okay, so Job 3:6 says, "That night, let darkness seize it. Let it not be included among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months." Now, commonly the word for moon is translated as month, but it doesn't mean month. All it is the tradition. When a moon is used, it must be talking about the month, because the people used the moon for months back then. So they just put month in instead. But in the Hebrew, we've got it here. Months is Yerach, and Yerach does not ever mean month. Doesn't mean the same thing as Chodashim. And I think people, because of the way Chodashim and Yerach are used in conjunction with each other sometimes, I think people kind of get confused about that. But I'll be going through that as well. Okay, so into the number of Yerach. And here you can see it's Yerach-im. That's the plural, Yerachim. So it's not moon, it's moons. Okay, this is what the word Yerach actually means, moon. And by association, the biblical usage is sometimes month. So some translations will sometimes say month, but that's not what the word means, never what it means. What it means, a better word for it, I like this word, is lunation. Okay, and a lunation is from when you've got the new moon, okay, and it's all darkness, and you go through to a full moon, and then the moon waxes. That's referred to as a lunation, and it's a period of 29.53 days. So what it should say is, that night, let darkness seize it. Let it not be included among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of moons. Okay, and we see one usage of the moons here. Moon is what rules over the night. So you've got days of the year, and then you've got moons. And moons is just used to mean nights sometimes. The number of moons, the number of days, the number of moons. Okay, that night, let darkness seize it. Let it not be included among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of moons. It makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? The number of months. Job 7:3 says, "So am I allotted months of futility and nights of trouble." Hebrew parallelism, when you say two things in the same, one thing in two different ways rather. Moons of futility, nights of trouble. Okay, they're the same thing. A moon of futility is the same as a night of trouble. So sometimes when it talks about moons, it's talking about nights. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Isaiah 60 verse 20, we see when Yerach is translated as moon, and it couldn't be translated as month. "No longer does your sun go down, nor your moon withdraw itself." So it's obvious what this word means. Okay, people want to go through the references for Yareach is how it's pronounced. These are them, and if you go through them, you'll see, if you just plug moon in, every time it's mistranslated it as month, they all make so much more sense. Exodus 2:1-2 says, "And a man of the house of Levi went and married the daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bore a son, and she saw that he was a lovely child. She hid him 3 moons. Okay, it says 3 months in most translations, but it's not 3 Chodashim. And Moshe knew how to say 3 Chodashim. He says it in Genesis 38:24. "And it came to be about 3 Chodashim after the Yehudah was informed." So he knew how to say Chodesh, obviously from all the rest of Torah he knows as well. But because we've got English translations and they go on these traditions of these things, we miss so much information. She hid him for 3 moons. Now that 3 moons could either be 3 nights, or it could have been 3 lunations. It could have been the entire period. You see that YHVH refers to moons in that sense. We'll see that as we go through. So Deuteronomy 21:10-13 says, when you go out to fight against your enemies, and Yehovah your Elohim shall give them into your hand, and you shall take them captive, you shall see among the captives a woman fair of form, and shall delight in her, and take her for your wife. Then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and trim her nails, put aside the mantle of her captivity, dwell in your house, mourn her father and her mother a moon of days. Okay? Not a month of days, a moon of days. Because a moon is another way to reckon time. It's part of his timepiece. Okay? The sun and the stars gives us the chodeshim. The moons are distinct periods of time. And they are things that Yehovah refers to all throughout the scripture. Sometimes it's a moon as a period of time. Sometimes it'll be a chodeshim. But they're always different. 2 Kings 15:13 says, Shalom, son of YHVH, began to reign in the 39th year of Uzziah, the king of Yehudah. He reigned a moon of days. Okay, so often you'll get this. It'll be a moon of days. Sometimes a moon is a night, but a moon of days is a lunation. Job 3 verse 6. Okay, the one that we looked at. That night, let darkness seize it. Let it not be included among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of moons. So that's different. A moon of days and the number of moons, in this context, they're different. One's a night, one's a lunation. So am I allotted moons of futility, nights of trouble. Again, this is the nighttime version of it. Oh, that I were as in moons past. We've got a saying, haven't we? Many moons ago. Okay, so it's familiar to us, this reckoning of time by moons, but they're not the same as the chodeshim. Okay, so oh that I were as in moons past, as in the days when Eloah protected me. Do you know the time when the wild mountain goats bear young? Or do you observe when the deer gives birth? This is Yehovah replying to Job. Okay, he says, do you know about these things? And then he says, do you number the moons they complete? So Yehovah uses these things as a reckoning of time. Obviously, I mean, he gave us that giant timepiece in the sky so that we could reckon time differently. Ashley's doing something at the moment. She's compiling data over the past 50 years. So it's going to take a while until we've got it. Okay, but she is putting the moons, the phases of the moon on each day, and then the chodeshim over them as they've been, and the feast days, to see if we can find any correspondence between the two. It's not important for this. I mean, as long as we understand what the moons are for, we can find greater significance later. But a moon is a different period of time to a chodesh, and they are used differently in the scriptures. Then I sent off the three, this is Yehovah speaking again. Then I sent off the 3 shepherds in one moon, in one night. Okay, so he uses both reckoning of time when he is speaking directly. 1 Kings 6:37-38 says, in the 4th year, the foundation of the house of Yehovah was laid in the month Ziv. That's what the English says. And in the 11th year, in the month Bul, the 8th month, the house was completed in all its matters and according to its plans. Thus he built it for 7 years. And from verses such as this, people get confused and they think that these terms are used interchangeably, but they're not. Let's look at the Hebrew. In the 4th year was the foundation of the house of Yehovah laid in the month, but it's Yerach. So it's not Chodeshim, it is moon. In the moon Ziv, the next verse says, and in the 11th year, in the moon Bul, which is the 8th Chodesh. Well, wait there. Is that saying that it's the moon Bul is the 8th Chodesh? Is this proof positive that the months are determined by the moon? It's not. If all that you had was a blue letter Bible, app or whatever it was, then you'd miss what the Hebrew actually says. We need to understand what the Hebrew is saying here. Okay, so this is the Hebrew of the verse. This word here is b'yirach. Okay, it's a bait and then the word yirach. And when you have a bait before a word, it means in that word. So we'll start off here, in moon. The next word here is bul. Okay, in moon bul. Then you've got this word here, which is who. And who in Hebrew means he. I've heard it said before that the way that you remember he and she in Hebrew is who is he and he is she, which is quite confusing. Okay, who means he means she. But the word who means he or it. The next word here is ha-chodesh, the month, ha-shmini. Okay, ha means the, and you would have it before both words of a phrase. So you'd have ha-chodesh ha-shmini, which is the third month, the month shmini, the 8th month. Shmini means 8th. So what we've got when we put it together is in moon bul, he, 8th month. What we've got here is Hebrew in what's called the construct state, where you've got forms of nouns that are next to each other. There's no such word as of in Hebrew. You will never find it in a Hebrew passage. Maybe in modern Hebrew, I'm not sure. Certainly not in ancient Hebrew. So the way that we get the word of is when things exist in the construct state. Then the word of is implied. So what it actually says is, in moon bul, he of the 8th month, which is completely different. It doesn't say which is the 8th month. It says that month bul is the moon of the 8th month. Because something that we've lost culturally is that months, or chodeshim, have moons associated with them as well. Why do full moons have names? I took this from an article. The early Native Americans didn't record time using months of the Julian or Gregorian calendar. Instead, tribes gave each full moon a nickname to keep track of the seasons and lunar months. Just as an aside, I'll address something, the Julian and Gregorian calendars. People say, why do we use the days of the Julian and Gregorian calendar when we're trying to work out the biblical calendar? Okay, that's just a misconception. If you've got a 7-day week, it doesn't matter what calendar you're going from. One period of time on one 7-day calendar is going to equal a period of time on the other 7-day calendar. The biblical calendar is 7 days. So if we take any 7-day calendar, that's going to correspond to the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th day, and Shabbat is always going to correspond with a day on another calendar. It doesn't mean that we're taking the Shabbat from that other calendar. It just means that we're using the 7-day calendar. Okay, so the early Native Americans, if anyone's ever tried to look at the tribes spreading out across the world, they'll know that there is evidence that the Native Americans came from the Hebrews. Okay? So they gave each full moon a nickname to keep track of the seasons and lunar months. Most of the names relate to an activity or an event which took place at that time in each location. However, it wasn't a uniform system. Tribes tended to name and count moons differently. Some, for example, counted 4 seasons a year, while others counted 5. Others defined a year as 12 moons, while others said there were 13. Which is, you know, we get this wacky system, don't we, of, oh, yep, there's 12 months in a year on the calendar that we follow, and then sometimes we add in a 13th month here, and that's nonsense. But some had 12, some had 13. Colonial Americans adopted some of the moon names and applied them to their own calendar system, which is why they're still in existence today, according to the Farmer's Almanac. So the moon names. January is Wolf Moon. Okay, so you could say, Wolf Moon, he of the month January, which is what the Hebrew says. Okay, month Bul, he of the 8th Chodesh. This moon was named because villagers used to hear packs of wolves howling in hunger around this time of year. So the name is Old Moon. Snow Moon in February, named because it's the snowish month in America. Traditionally also referred to as Hunger Moon because hunting was difficult when it was snowy. Worm Moon, as temperatures warm, earthworm casts begin to appear and birds begin finding food. It's also known as Sap Moon, Crow Moon, and Lenten Moon. Pink Moon, known as the pink moon after the pink wildflowers which appear in the US and Canada in early spring. This moon is also known as egg moon due to the spring egg-laying season. Some coastal tribes refer to it as fish moon because it appeared at the same time as the shad swimming upstream. Flower moon, now this one's going to be significant. You're going to need to remember something about this. Spring has officially sprung by the time May arrives. The flowers and colourful blooms dot the landscape. This moon is also known as corn planting moon, as crops are sown in time for harvest, or bright moon. Okay, hold on to this piece of information. This moon happens in May, and it's called bright moon, because this full moon is known to be one of the brightest. Some people refer to it as milk moon. Okay, June we've got strawberry moon because it's the beginning of strawberry picking season. Okay, this moon appears in the same month as the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, at 17 hours of daylight. So basically what we need to take away from this is that a Chodesh would have a moon. So when you say month or moon bul, he of the 8th Chodesh, it makes perfect sense according to what we know right now. Doesn't mean that the words are used interchangeably. July thunder moon. Named due to the prevalence of summer thunderstorms, it's sometimes referred to as the full buck moon because at this time of year, buck's antlers are fully grown. Sturgeon moon in August. Tribes in North America typically caught sturgeon during this month, but also it's when grain and corn were gathered, so it's also referred to as grain moon. September, the harvest moon. Now this is significant, this harvest moon. The harvest moon is the name given to the first full moon that takes place closest to the autumnal equinox. Okay, so that's called the harvest moon. And that is another witness with the equinox about the crops getting ripe. It was during September that most of the crops were harvested ahead of the autumn, and this moon would give light to farmers so they could carry on working longer in the evening, also called barley moon, full corn moon, or fruit moon. Hunter's moon in October, as people planned for the cold months, the October moon came to signify the ideal time for hunting game, which were becoming fatter from eating falling grains. This month is also known as the travel moon and dying grass moon. Worth bearing in mind this as well, the October moon, okay, it's when the animals were becoming fatter because of eating the falling grains. Okay, November frost moon, first of the winter frosts, historically begins around now in the US. Winter begins to bite, leading to this month's moon moniker. It's also known as the beaver moon. December cold moon, nights are long and dark, winter's grip tightens, hence this moon's name. Okay, so absolutely something that we're familiar with, having a month in a certain Chodesh. Then we come to moon Ziv. Okay, the moon of Ziv, and Ziv means brightness. Okay, anyone remember what month bright moon was in? Oh, what do you know? We still call it the same thing today. Okay, Bul. Bul means increase of produce, and that's October and November. That's when the animals were getting fatter. Okay, it's also right after they would have brought in all of the crops. So you can see why they would have named these moons certain things according to what was going on in the land at the time. Nothing strange here at all. Doesn't mean that Chodesh is anything to do with the moon. Doesn't mean the terms are used interchangeably. 1 Kings 6 verse 1 says, "And it came to be in the 480th year after the children of Yisrael had come out of the land of Mitzrayim, in the 4th year of the reign of Shlomo over Yisrael, in the Chodesh of Ziv, he of the 2nd Chodesh." The Chodesh of Ziv? I thought Ziv was a moon. It is a moon. Okay? Like we would say, the moon of May, the bright moon. So in the Chodesh of the bright moon, he of the 2nd Chodesh. The 2nd Chodesh is what the Chodesh is, but it's also the Chodesh in which we have the moon, Ziv. So it's called the Chodesh of Ziv. It's the Chodesh in which Ziv happens, and then we have the Chodesh here. Doesn't mean that the terms are used interchangeably. Shouldn't cause us any confusion. Ziv, he of the 2nd Chodesh. That's the clue. He of the 2nd Chodesh, or it of the 2nd Chodesh, if you like. Okay, so the Hebrew of this verse shows us that month is Chodesh and it's Ziv. Okay, these are tools that are available to anyone. If they want to take the word month and you want to see what it absolutely says, go on blueletterbible.org and you can do it there. But as I said, the month, the Chodesh of Ziv, isn't a problem for us. It is the Chodesh in which Ziv occurs. And Ziv is he of the 2nd Chodesh, which is the Chodesh which is referred to. Okay, so in the Chodesh of Ziv, he of 2nd Chodesh. Okay, simple enough to understand. 1 Kings 8:2 says, "And all the men of Yisrael assembled to Shlomo at the festival in the moon of Ethanim." Okay, people think that Ethanim is the name of the 7th Chodesh. not what it says. It says the moon of Ethanim is he of the 7th Chodesh. And Ethanim means enduring. So we might call it enduring moon. That's what they called it. Esther 3:7. Not only are the Yerachim called by a name, sometimes the Chodesh is called by a name as well. This kind of came about after they came out of Babylon. Very interesting what these words mean. Okay, the Chodesh of Nisan. Well, we know that Yehovah called it the Chodesh of Aviv. So the Chodesh of Nisan, why would that be after they've come from a foreign land? Well, Nisan means their flight. Okay, what happened in the month of Aviv? Passover, the Exodus. It's the month of their flight. That's why it's called so. Well, that's why I think it's called so. It would make perfect sense for it to be. The Chodesh of Sivan. Okay, Sivan means their covering, the Chodesh of their covering. Esther 2:16 makes reference to the Chodesh of Teveth. Teveth means goodness. Okay? Zechariah 1:7 says, on the 24th day of the 11th Chodesh, which is the Chodesh of Shevat. So after a certain period of time, they started naming their Chodesh. They also named their moons. Well, when we can differentiate those two things, we can see an awful lot more depth in Scripture as to what it's actually saying. Shevat, and Shevat means a rod. Zechariah 7:1 is a little bit different. It says, in the 4th year of King Darius, that's Darius if you want to say his name wrong, it came to be that the word of Yehovah came to Zechariah on the 4th of the 9th Chodesh, Kislev. That makes you think that the 9th Chodesh is Kislev, or Kislev. Okay? Not what it says in the Hebrew. It came to pass in the 4th year of King Darius that the word of Yehovah came unto Zechariah in the 4th day of the 9th month, 9th Chodesh. And then it says in the King James translation, even in Kislev. Even in Kislev. Okay, why would it say even in Kislev? Well, if we look here, we've got the word Kislev here, but it's Ber-Kislev. So what it actually says is, in the 4th year of King Darius, it came to be that the word of Yehovah came to Zechariah on the 4th of the 9th Chodesh in Kislev. Much more likely that Kislev is just a place where the word of Yehovah came to him, not the name of the month. It's actually unimportant for the calendar teaching. It's just as I was going through, I was discovering these things about names. I thought, that's interesting, I'll share it. So 1 Kings 6:38, in the 11th year, in the moon Bul, he of the 8th Chodesh, the house was completed in all its matters. So what we see here is that they were reckoning things by both the Chodesh and also by the moons, by the Yerachim. Okay, so these things were given for signs and for Moedim and for days and for years. Okay, so the moon for signs. The moon does give us signs. I'm not saying that there's any relevance to these things. We will see when Ashley's compiled all of the data whether these things show anything or whether we can discern that they show anything. But the moon does do some weird things. Okay, we've got full moons. Everyone's aware of what a full moon is. Then we've got a harvest moon. And that's the full moon that's closest to the autumn equinox. Okay, so they would have reckoned the moon as relevant to the Moedim. That's not what the moon is for Moedim means, but it's one of the things that it could mean. Black moon. Okay, most experts agree this refers to a second new moon in a calendar month, because you've got the Chodesh, and the Chodesh could be 31 days long. The moon cycle is 29.53 days. Then in some Chodesh, you're going to have a new moon at the beginning of it, and then a new moon at the end of it. And that's called a black moon. Something we'll be familiar with is a blue moon. Okay, once in a blue moon. That's a phenomenon that occurs when there's a second full moon in one calendar month. So we've got black moons and we've got blue moons. And I don't know what they mean, but I know that they do give signs to the people who are on earth. So we get to this verse. He made the moon for Moedim. He made the moon for appointed times. This is the one where everyone's like, it's not the sun and the stars that give us the Chodeshim and tell us where the feasts start, because he gave the moon for appointed times. Okay. On a very simplistic level, if we continue reading through Psalm 104, then we can see what this is making reference to. Verse 20, you put darkness and it is night. In it all the beasts of the forest creep. The young lions are roaring for prey and seeking their food from ale. The sun arises, they withdraw, lie down in their dens. Man goes out to his work and to his labor till evening. So we've got the passage of a day there. Okay, we've got the night time, then the night passes and the things that happen in the night pass. Then the sun arises, those things withdraw, those animals withdraw, and then man goes forth to his work. And he goes to his labor until evening, when you'll get another moon. So very simply, the appointed times being shown to us by the moon, because the moon rules over the night, and we have to have day and night to know the passage of days, to know what day of the month it is, the moon is given to us for appointed times in that way. Some of the appointed times are more than one day as well. So how do you know when you've been there for 7 or 8 days? Well, you know by the moon. The moon is given to us for appointed times. So very simplistically, what this is saying, and we can see that from the way that it's followed in the passage. However, there is something that is significant in it as well. This is in the NASB translation. It's interesting. He made the moon for the Moedim. The sun knows the place of its setting, is what it says in the NASB. Not really what it says in the Hebrew. In the Hebrew, it's closer to what we see in the King James. This is from the Book of Enoch. When I include the Book of Enoch, I'm not saying the Book of Enoch is inspired. I'm not saying that it's good for anything other than to see the sort of things that they were paying attention to when the Book of Enoch was written. I'm going to make reference later as well to the Dead Sea Scrolls to see what sort of thing in the heavens they were paying attention to. We see from the Book of Enoch that they were paying attention to when the moon set. Okay? We've got the sun going forth and setting. We've got the moon going forth and setting as well. I didn't even know that the moon set until recently. Well, the moon does set. It says in the Book of Enoch, and in certain months, certain Chodeshim, she alters her setting, and in certain Chodeshim, she pursues her own peculiar course. In 2 Chodeshim, the moon sets with the sun in those 2 middle portals, the 3rd and the 4th. Previous to this, he has made reference to the fact that the sky is divided up into 6 gates, is what the person who wrote this is referring to. 6 gates. These are the 3rd and the 4th of those, these areas of the sky. She goes forth for 7 days and turns about and returns again through the portal where the sun rises. I wonder if this is the word teshuvah. I do not have the Hebrew of the Book of Enoch to check, but we can see these cycles spoken of. And accomplishes all her light. And she recedes from the sun, and in 8 days she enters the 6th portal from which the sun goes out. And when the sun goes forth from the 4th portal, she goes forth 7 days until she goes forth from the 5th and turns back again in 7 days into the 4th portal and accomplishes all her light. She recedes and enters into the 1st portal in 8 days. She returns again in 7 days into the 4th portal from which the sun goes forth. Thus I saw their position, how the moons rose and the sun set in those days. So I include this so that we know that they were paying attention to when the sun rose, the moon rose, and when the moon set and the sun set. I couldn't confirm this until the day of the equinox, or it turns out I could have if I just used this software. This was sent to me by a guy called Chris in Georgia, and he had set up something so that he could track the equinox. I said to him, if you're looking at these things on this day, could you please tell me whether the sun sets and the moon sets in the same place on the equinox? This is one of the pieces of information that I was given when I was going through the Signs from Yehovah teaching. The moon sets and the sun sets in the same place on the equinox. Okay, and it's only on the equinox. So this is the path of the sun on that day that Chris sent to me. This is the path of the moon on the same day. Okay, so we've got the moon is for appointed times. The moon is for Moedim. The sun knows the place of its setting. That's the relevant part of the verse which nobody reads. Okay, the sun knows the place of its setting, or the sun knows it's going down, as we'll see in the King James Version. That's really that's a better translation, but in it, his going down, or its going down, same word for his and its. It's talking about this place where it sets. The sun knows the place of its setting. This is the equipment that Chris had set up, that he'd made himself. So everybody can track when the equinox is. Okay, and everybody can look at the sky and know where the sun's setting and where the moon's setting. And all of these things would have been very familiar to these people who lived outside and were watching this giant clock in the sky. We have to now kind of reverse engineer things and rediscover these things. But to them, they just looked up and they're like, oh yeah, look, the sun and the moon are doing that thing that they do on the equinox. So the moon is for appointed times in various different ways. That's no kind of problem for this calendar. Okay, again, if you object to the science, just take the effect which is being spoken of, the observable effect. The moon's orbital motion combined with the larger orbit of the Earth around the sun carries it farther eastward among the constellations of the zodiac from night to night. At any one moonrise, the moon occupies a particular place on the celestial sphere, the great dome of the heavens. But when the Earth turns towards the point 24 hours later, the moon has moved off to the east about 12 degrees. And it takes an average of 50 minutes longer for the Earth to rotate toward the moon and for the moon thus to rise. Think of it as a giant slinky in which each loop, representing one lunar orbit of the Earth, advances the orbit a bit farther along the spiral path. So these things change, come into being together on that night, the night of the equinox. But around the date of the harvest moon, the moon rises about the same time. So it's this harvest moon again that's around the autumnal equinox. But around the date of the harvest moon, the moon rises about the same time. This is another sign that the moon gives us. It rises about the same time. Why? Remember that the zodiac is the band of constellations through which the moon travels from night to night. So it takes the sun, a chodeshim, to go through them. It takes the moon 2 or 3 days or nights. The section of the zodiac band in which the full moon travels around the start of autumn is the section that forms the most shallow angle with the eastern horizon. Because the moon's orbit on successive nights is more nearly parallel to the horizon at that time, its relationship to the eastern horizon does not change appreciably, and the Earth does not have to turn as far as to bring up the moon. So this is why the moon and the sun are coming up on the harvest moon. The moon may rise as little as 23 minutes later on several nights before and after the full harvest moon at about 42 degrees north latitude, which means extra light at the peak harvest time near autumn. By the time the moon has reached the last quarter, however, the typical 50-minute delay has returned. Okay, so this is given to us absolutely for science so that we can know when these things are happening. And it's only difficult for us to understand because we live in houses and we never look at the sky in the nighttime, really. At the start of spring, the opposite applies. The full moon is in the section of the zodiac that has the steepest angle with respect to the eastern horizon. For several days bracketing the full moon nearest the vernal equinox, the delay in moonrise is as much as 75 minutes at 42 degrees north latitude. Okay? Now, using the moon for chodeshim had to come from somewhere. Okay, and the place that it actually comes from is from Babylon. We know that Babylon used the moon to determine what a month is. Or what they would call a month was what we would call a moon, what Scripture calls a moon. Okay, Babylon had the pagan priesthood which spread into Assyria so that the border between Babylon and Assyria was somewhat artificial to their priesthood. It didn't really mean much to them. Before Babylon conquered Assyria's capital city Nineveh in 612 BCE, this priesthood performed their nightly observations of the heavens and made their first forays at mathematical astronomy. The kings of Assyria recognized the supposed powers of this priesthood and received letters from them. Okay, and we still have those letters. So this is letter number 303. On the 30th, I saw the moon. It was in a high position for the 30th day. Presently, it will be as high as it stands on the 2nd day. If agreeable to the king, my lord, let the king wait for a report. Let the king wait, meaning for a report, from the city of Ashur. The king, my lord, may then determine for us the first day of the month. So this whole thing about the sighted moon, this is where it comes from. These are the people who were doing it. They went into Babylon and then suddenly their language changed for certain things. Okay, we see in Ezra 6:15 it says, "And this house was completed on the 3rd day of the moon of Adar." This is significant because this is a transliteration in the Hebrew of a Babylonian month name or a Babylonian moon name. So we can see where they got the name of this particular moon from. This was after they came out of Babylon, which is Ezra, Nehemiah, at the times that they came out. And we also see it in Nehemiah. Okay, so Adar means glorious. I don't really know what that means. I thought I'd share the information as I was going through it. In Nehemiah 6:15, it says, "The wall was completed on the 25th of Elul," which is another Hebrew transliteration of a Babylonian moon name. These things came from Babylon. And Elul means nothingness, okay, which doesn't really sound like a name that Yehovah gives to his moons, but it does kind of sound like the sort of thing that a nihilistic sort of culture would. Babylon, the moon of nothingness. Okay, this is where it comes from. We know for a fact that it was the name of the Babylonian moon, and they are just making the best that they can effort of using a Hebrew transliteration to refer to that moon. So they came from Babylon. Next thing that I want to look at, the moon's phases in Scripture, because something that stood out before I knew any of this was that the moon had phases. So what's the significance of the moon? I thought probably the phases of the moon. The moon phases are mentioned in Scripture, but it's not quite as significant as we would have perhaps thought. Proverbs 7:18-21 says, "Come, let us take our fill of love until morning. Let us delight ourselves with love. For my husband is not at home. He is gone on a long journey. He took a bag of silver with him. He comes home on the day of the new moon," it says. Okay, but it's not Chodesh here. "With her many words she leads him astray. With her smooth lips she seduces him." So let's look at this passage. Okay. The words translated as new moon are translated in the King James Version as full moon, and it is keseh. This is a very, very strange word, though, and I'll show you why it's relevant to our conversation on the calendar. Here we see it, ha-keseh. Looks like the word is used twice here. It's not. Keseh is just full and moon, which is why you've got it twice here, but only once there. Doesn't mean full moon, though. Okay, keseh, full moon. That's what some people think that this word means. Gesenius, though, said, "The etymology is not clear to me, for it is not satisfactory to say that it is so called from the whole moon being covered with light." Okay, so the word, which is its root word, is kasah, and it means to cover, conceal, or hide. So he says, the etymology is not clear to me. It's not satisfactory to say that the whole moon is covered with light. Verbs of covering are often applied in the sense of hiding and covering over, but never, as far as I know, to mean covered in light. We could kind of fudge that in the English and say, oh, it's covered in light. That's not what the verbs mean. It means that it's covered, it's obscured. Okay, this is from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, this is what they thought about the phases of the moon. And the reason that I include this, again, isn't to say the Dead Sea Scrolls has got anything going on. There's lots of error that I've found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's not like an accurate, inspired picture of what was going on. This just tells us about their observations of the sky. Okay, and this is what they say. The system that he uses to describe the moon, this is talking about this piece of writing about the phases of the moon, says the system he uses to describe the moon may strike the reader as peculiar. It's really not so much peculiar as theological, certainly biblical in the eyes of its adherents. The writer conceives of the lunar month in terms of the moon being obscured or revealed. So when we've got the keseh, and it's from this root word which means to cover, it's very much in line with the way that this guy interpreted these things. So the full moon, not covered with light, maybe it's talking in these terms of it being obscured or fully covered over. But this is a difficult word to translate. The scripture that people will bring up is blow up the trumpet in the new moon or in the full moon on our solemn feast day. And what they'll say is, look, it is by the moon. It's got to be by the moon. There's only one day that you're blowing trumpets on a new moon. It's the Feast of Trumpets. And then by the time it's the full moon, it's Sukkot. No. if you go by the new moon as the start of the month and you're saying that marks trumpets, then 14 days later isn't Sukkot. It doesn't really work on that basis, but it doesn't work linguistically, okay? Psalm 81 verse 3 in the ISR version says, trump during the Chodesh, a trump in the well-marked day of your holiday, because this word is not really clear what it means. But the word for new moon is Chodesh. Doesn't say anything about the moon being new. Doesn't say anything about that being the phase of the moon. It says trump in the Chodesh, which is the instructions that we saw before. In your Roshim, Chodeshim, the beginning of your months, they were to blow trumpets. So this is what that's a reference to. But we'll keep on with the word keseh. Okay, so we've got the word here translated in the King James Version, in the time appointed. Certainly doesn't mean anything to do with times or being appointed. But it's this word keseh again. In Job 26 verse 9, it uses this word. And it says, he covers the face of the full moon. He covers the face of the full moon. Okay? See the word being used there, full moon. Doesn't mean full moon. Maybe something to do with it being obscured. We're really not sure. Here it is in the Hebrew. Again, it doesn't appear twice, it appears once. Full moon, same word. In the ISR version, though, it says covering the surface of his throne. Full moon, throne, what's the relation between those two things? The Young's literal translation says taking hold of the face of the throne. So it's not the full moon here. So you see that there's translational difficulties with this word. Okay, there's another word as well. We've got keseh, which is this full moon or covered moon as it's been interpreted, even though it says nothing about moon. It's just something to do with something being covered. And then we've got this word as well, which is very, very close to it, which is kiseh. And kiseh means seat of honor, the throne, seat, stool, seat of honor, throne, royal dignity, authority, power, and it's from the same root word. So I'm going to suggest a different translation of the verse that people think causes problems. Blow up the trumpet in the Chodesh in authority on our solemn feast day. Blow up the trumpet in the Chodesh in power on our solemn feast day. Could mean both of those things. I'm not saying that I think that it means both of these things. What I'm saying is we don't know what that word means. We know what this one means, so it's got nothing to do with the Feast of Trumpets being on the new moon or anything like that. Important to cover that though, because people will have certain verses in the back of their heads, and unless I cover all of them and all of the things that they're thinking, they'll hold on to that one tiny thing. Isaiah 30, 23 to 26 gives us another word for moon. It says, and he shall give the rain for your seed, with which you sow the ground, and bread of the increase of the earth, and it shall be fat and rich, your cattle grazing in an enlarged pasture on that day. And the oxen and the young donkeys that work the ground eat seasoned fodder, winnowed with shovel and fan. And on every high mountain, and on every high hill, there shall be rivers and streams, waters in the day of the great slaughter, when the towers fall. And the light of the moon shall be as the light of the sun. Okay, so we've got it contrasted with the sun here. Whatever this word is, it's contrasted with the sun. So certainly suggests that it's moon. The word is levanah. Okay, and the word levan means white. Okay, levanah is some kind of reference to its whiteness or its brightness. Song of Songs 6 verse 10 says, who is she who shines forth as the morning, fair as the levanah? So what I'm going to suggest is that this is the full moon. Okay, when the moon is bright, when it is white in the sky. Okay, we've got one reference to it being covered, and we've got one reference to it being white. So if we want to look for the phases of the moon in it, doesn't seem to be where people are looking for them. But I'll suggest this. It's not important to the calendar and the reckoning of time that Yehovah has. It's just suggestions. Okay, so in conclusion, what we've seen is that Yehovah has given us a giant timepiece in the sky. He's given us the Chodeshim, which seem fixed in the sky, and that the sun goes through the Chodeshim, and that gives us the Chodeshim, the months. The moon goes through the Chodeshim, and that gives us different things. The sun and the moon rising at the same time, or them setting in the same part of the sky. It's all important for the reckoning of these things. It's all right there in Scripture, but there's no kind of problems that people have suggested with this at all. All it actually does is refine it and give us a better understanding of it when we investigate these things. So the sun and the moon go through the Chodeshim, and it speaks of them going forth, and it speaks of them returning as well. And this is the calendar of Yah. He's given us it right there. All that we actually needed to do all along was look up at the sky and say, what's actually happening here? Because he's already told us that it's our way of reckoning these things. Okay? So I think that we should pray and thank Yehovah. This is nothing to do with me. This isn't JP's calendar. As I said, I sat down at the beginning of the week. I didn't have any of this in place, and he just laid it out for me. Father, thank you that you've shown us these things. I don't know why you've chosen to show it at this time or what it's to achieve, but I pray that your name's glorified, it's exalted through these things. As your people return to following your ways, they can begin to return to following the calendar that you've laid out for us. Thank you that you've brought all of us together today. Thank you that you brought all the people from all over the world to come to Sukkot. Thank you that we can rejoice in these things before you as your people. I don't know what you're doing, but I thank you for it. Amen.